Good morning. Our hand today is going to be 5-6. Offsuit, we are under the gun, 10 NL game. This is a fold. Folds around in the blinds, and like yesterday when we covered a blind versus blind, this is also a blind versus blind, but a small blind open raises 2.5, big blind calls. This sets up a more likely strategy that we should be utilizing with folds us in the small blind we're going to be raising. This player's playing 16-12. He's definitely a tighter player, a tighter aggressive player. We have some hands on him, 188. We can see his raise first in stat, 75% from the small blind, 2 out of 6 from the button, 1 out of 12 from the cutoff. He's played 3 out of 4. His attempt to steal stats, 27%. And you just look at it, you're not going to always be able to bet the button on the small sample sizes like this with 6 hands. 2 out of 6 that could just be bad cards. You're not going to get decent cards every single time, so I'm not terribly surprised, whatever. So but we can set up to say we think this player is going to be raising a lot, so I just went ahead and gave him all suited, gave him, offsuit hands. This is 75%. Is this what he might be raising? Yeah, he might be raising it. He might actually be like with all queens, and then we can drop some of the weaker offsuit suited and connectors, something like that. That's 74.7%. We're gonna go with it and say this guy is willing to make this raise first in, and just attack. I don't know if that's right or not, but when you see this player's 12-9, he's even tighter player, and his fold to steal stat 78%, then it kind of makes sense why we should be raising so often. This guy's just going to be folding. So we're going to go to his steal, defend the steal, or fold to steal. So fold blind to steal 78%, 18 out of 23. He's done it 91 times from the big blind, 67 times from the small blind. So 10 out of 11. And this fold blind to steal is a raise coming from late position, cutoff button, or small blind. So this guy is probably folding way too much from the blind against a possible steal. So we can build a range like that. Now, I did build a range that looks something like this. That's 12.7%. And the reason I did that is when we look at his notes, we have call to bet from blinds range. We've got threes, we've got ace jack suited, jack nine suited, we've got ace jack off and king jack off. So I assume he's going to be doing like Broadway. He doesn't have the tens, so I didn't really want to include that. Yeah, the ace 10, king 10, queen 10, jack 10 off. I think that's going to add way too much, 16%. I just don't think he's at that level. I do think suited Broadway though, ace 10, suited ace 10 through jack 10, I think he's playing those. We do have a jack 9 in his range, so we're going to have to add just a few more maybe. And these are just like iffies. Maybe he has and maybe he doesn't. But I think this is pretty decent range, 14%. And so, you raise so frequently, he's going to be folding, over 80% of the time. That's just easy money. Whenever it folds around to you, just open raise. See what he does. So we now see a flop of 7-4-3. Small blind checks. Now he had the initiative. This isn't necessarily a board that we would probably bet all the time. We've got a massive range here. So, if you're betting all the time, it's most likely a bluff. And we also figure that this board kind of misses this villain quite a bit. So when he checks, I think maybe he's probably would bet straights and sets and probably two pair and probably over pair at this point. I think maybe top pair, maybe he's not going to bet all the top pair. And actually, I think the over pair, maybe he doesn't bet all of the over pair. maybe he lets like aces and kings that he checks, and then top pair like ace 7 king 7 he checks as well. um, Although I think you get value from those hands, and it's really like the weaker hands that, well, no, I think ace 7 king 7. Well, yeah, tell you what, we're gonna assume that he would have bet all of these vulnerable hands. um so they're not in the range. We're gonna assume he would have bet the overpair except like aces, kings, and we'll say queens as well. Like queens, we'll say 50% queens. Those are in his checking range. I think none of these are in his checking range. Not when there's a spade out there. We're gonna give him all of these weaker pairs in his checking range. I think we're going to leave in. Yeah, I think we're going to leave in most of the flush draws. We're going to take out the nut and the second nut flush draw. We're not going to have the open ender in there. Okay. That's what we're going to do. Let's X those hands out. All right, so 78% he's going to check. And that could be about right. That you're only betting about 25 or 30%. It's a massive range to begin with. Now, if you bet, then you're following it up with a bet on the turn quite often. We just don't know what his fold to C bet stat. I mean, 3 to 5 out of position. This is a board that I think when you bet, you'll probably get called by overcards, and you'll need two barrels. So I kind of feel like you might just check a lot of your hands, wait for that next card, and then bet, have a lot of your bluffs in there. All right, so we've got that, and then this villain checks behind. Again, pre-flop, he looks, pretty tight. I think a set's probably gonna bet. I think overpair's definitely gonna bet. I bet a top pair's gonna bet. We're gonna give him all of the weaker hands. We're gonna scale the flush draws. I kind of feel like the flush draws might be betting, but he seems like he may be a little bit passive. But he's tight, and the C bets don't suggest that he's betting a whole lot with his draws. So I think we're gonna go with that. 10 of clubs. All right, so they both check at this point. So here, I think top pair and over pair are out for him. That 10 could have easily. I think 10 comes. I'm betting. I'm betting with a lot of my hands. I'm betting with overcards. I'm going to try to represent that 10, especially since villain checks behind. Yeah, villain could easily have that 10, but no, I think we just bet, and we bet with basically everything that we could come up with. I guess we'll leave flush draw and open ender in there. I don't know. I take that out. We're gonna go back. What we're gonna do is we're gonna take the flush draw out. I think he probably would have bet that based on his C bet stat. I think he's probably gonna bet that. So we X out the flush draw, open enders, and then the 10 of clubs comes out. So yeah, we don't have any flush draws. I think that makes sense. So again, somewhat weak. He checks. Villain should be betting. I mean, one of them should have bet. Once it goes check check, this guy should be betting. Once he checks a turn, this guy should be betting. Just to try to represent that 10. I mean, it's as simple as that. Be aggressive. So I don't think the top pair. I think top pair is out. We're looking at something like that. Now this guy, I think he could reasonably have a flush draw. So we're going to leave all of those in there. And then we see a river. 7 of diamonds. And at this point, it goes check, check. This guy checked it flop, checked the turn. I don't think there's any reason why he should be betting at this point. Yeah, I think he missed his opportunity to bet. So it's probably best just to check. And villain 8 checks. I kind of feel like same thing with this guy too. The sevens, you're not going to convince anyone that you just have trip sevens. It's just not going to happen. Not going to happen because you would have betted at some point in the hand. You would have bet the flop probably. So you can't really represent the sevens at all. So it's just probably just check check. So we see their hands. He shows ace jack off. Does he have that? Yeah, he's got it at this point in the hand. Oops. We're going to give him all of that. Yeah, I mean, he's got it right there. Ace high. Does this guy have jack 9? So I'm glad we put that jack 9 in his range. Yeah, it's still a nothing hand. So we have it in the range. So we can just kind of take notes here that this was a RFI 2.5 big blind in small blind with ace of diamonds, jack of clubs. He is out of position. And he checked on a 7 of spade, 4 spade, 3 diamond, 10 of clubs, 7 of diamonds. We'll take this guy too. He called SB 2.5 big blind, RFI in big blind with jack 9 diamonds. He is in position. Check, check, check. All right, so let's talk about these hands. This guy has a massive range. You're not betting 100% here. If you're c betting, even 80%, that's going to be way too much. You're going to have way too much junk in your hand. So when you bet that and you get called on the turn, you're going to be really pulling back your c bet, your turn bet at that point. You just can't continue betting at that level. But let's talk about what we can do. So we already said this is kind of a low board. Yeah, we're gonna catch quite a few pieces of it if we're gonna be stealing at the frequency that we should be stealing at, which is a lot. We're gonna have backdoor draws. We're gonna have spade draws. You could easily see bet here anywhere from 25 to 40%. You're gonna be c betting. Your straights, you're going to see bet your sets, your 2 pair that are in your range. You're going to see bet vulnerable holdings, so you're going to be more likely to see bet like 8s to 10s and jacks, because those, if a face card comes on the turn, you could easily be beat at that point. You're going to be c betting your 7x hands, but you can't really c bet all of them. You have to withhold some 7x hands. You have to withhold some overpairs in your hands, even some maybe 2 pair and straights in your hands. So when you check, it's just not automatically you completely missed. So with that, you're looking at maybe 75% of the time betting with a7 and king 7. I do consider those vulnerable hands because you've got 8, 9, 10, jack, queen, and king that could come that could easily beat your 7. But maybe what you do is, you can check with like a7 of diamonds. So you have a backdoor diamond draw. And if the diamond comes, then you have possibility of check calling again. And an important thing is, a lot of times once you check and give up and miss your c bet, then GTO recommends checking again when you're out of position. And I think that that's mostly true. That would be mostly true even in this position, this situation. Except if this player, checks behind on the flop, then that changes things. Then, we didn't just give up our action, go check call and check call. We checked, he checked. So let's regain the initiative by betting again on the turn. I think Ace Jack is definitely a hand that he could have gone ahead and c-bet with just as a bluff. Of course, there's probably better hands that you could do that with, but you bet with Ace Jack, and then you get called, and then I think with the 10 you follow it up again. I do think a 10 improves it. I think there's hands that have a 10x that we would have c-bet. So let's follow it up again. If he folds, hey, that's great. He folded us, and we only had ace high. If we check and it goes check check, I stand by my claim. At this point, we are going to attack, and we're going to be betting again. We're going to try to represent that 10 even with our weak ace jack. If we get called, we're probably just going to be done with the hand, especially with the 7, because the 7's not really going to change a whole lot. I think we bet we're getting called by hands that beat us. Honestly, I don't think Jack 9's calling, but we figure even against like a flush draw, we figure to even be ahead of those. Because if you think about what hands are going to be calling, I don't think a Jack 9's calling us. I don't think like a King Queen's calling us on the turn. I think flush draw is calling us. I think open ender is calling us, or straight draw, maybe gut shot is calling us. I think a one pair hand is calling us. We beat a lot of those, misdraws. We possibly beat all of those misdraws, unless he has like an ace queen that he played, ace queen suited. But again, when we think about 3-bet, I said I'm putting him up on queens plus ace king as the raise. So the ace kings I think are gone. Maybe he has ace queen that could beat us, but that's small. So yeah, I think you bet, and then on the river you check behind, and possibly you might have to check call. 10 NL. Just kind of depends on a player. I'm not expecting him to bet on the river. If he bets on the river, he probably has a hand. But against better opponents, you bet the turn, he gets called on the river. You probably have to check call as a bluff catch. What about this player? Once he missed a c-bet, this guy could possibly bet. He does have the backdoor diamond draw. You bet. Turn comes out with the 10. I think that kind of helps. Again, I assume he would check, and then I think he followed up with the second bet. That's kind of suggesting he's got pocket pairs in his range, so he could easily have had 8s, 9s, 10s, or jacks. He's betting that again. He could have any of those. He could have like a 7, 7, 8, 7, 9. 7, 9's a little rough, but like ace 7 maybe. We didn't include ace 7 in his range. 7s are going to be hard. I guess 7s would be hard, but if you think about how you bet, yeah, most likely would be those pocket pairs. I think 8s, 9s, 10s, or jacks. I would think we're looking at jacks. If he bets a flop and then bets a turn again, so bets a flop, you're betting 2.5. On the turn, he's probably betting 5 to 7, maybe 5 to 7.5 or something like that. It's going to be hard for ace jack to call, and that means jack 9 wins it with the worst hand. So I think that's how he should have played it. If he bets flop and turn and gets called, then I think you're done with it. Again, 7 doesn't help. At that point, well, I take that back. You're not done with it. I think 7 doesn't help. It doesn't complete any of the obvious draws that a check calls might be chasing. So when that 7 gets there, I think it's worthwhile to fire a third barrel. You can't win. You don't have an ace high. You don't have even a king high. You've got a jack high. So you can't win at showdown, or you don't expect to win at showdown. So your only option to win that pot is going to be to bet, and that's actually a pretty favorable card for us. Miss the spades, and miss the straights. Because you can see 8-9. Yeah, 8-9 could have called. 5-6, 5-8 could have called. 6-8 could have called. A lot of straights, a lot of flush draws that could have been out there that would have matched this guy's check calling range on the flop and the turn. So yeah, I'm gonna take that back. Yeah, well, you bet the flop, you bet the turn and get called on that 7 on a hand on a card that does not complete those draws. Fire it out for that third barrel. I wouldn't be surprised if he folds. And if he calls, then you make a note that he called down with ace high. He called down with ace high, and you know what you do then? Then when you have a 7 or you have a pocket pair, you go for 3 streets of value. All right, so hopefully you enjoy this hand. If you do, you can look tomorrow for another.